Nyanji Chimbo Zodan Nimi, Zonin Monum Chimbo, Nagya, Bakirtangan Zondo, Shirmando, Tomba, Tiji Chanla, Gifsham Tsara, Nature was saying Yankam Sanja, or Tikishan, Yala, Jimmy Panzojala, Sorando, Tobampo, Shinji, Low.
The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficulty encountering billions of aeons. I now see it here to receive and uphold it, vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning, to liberate all beings, thus generate the supreme bodhicitta. Let us continue today with the Surangama Sutra. I believe I've made a little error yesterday. I would like to make a correction. When we were talking about the 800 virtues related to the eye faculty, I think I made a mistake. When I stated that there are 400 associated to the front direction and 400 to each of the side directions and then 400 to the back, it is stated that since one would not be able to see the back and would not be able to see the 1/3 of the two side directions in such a way, there should be 800 virtues. But my calculation may have been erroneous, because if the four directions each uptakes the 400 virtues, then there would be 1,600 virtues altogether. So that must be wrong. The explanation according to Master Oyi, in the commentary, he stated that the four main directions each uphold 200 virtues, and then the four sub directions each uphold 100 virtues. In such a way, there are 1,200 in total, and then 800 virtues that can be shown, or that the 800 functions that can be used. I think this is rather much more simple to understand. The four directions would uptake 200 virtues on each of the directions, which comes to 800, and then on the two sub-sides, two sub-directions, there would be 200 that cannot be seen, as well as from the back that cannot be seen. So it's a little bit difficult to calculate, but the numbers would be correct. So 200 to each of the four directions and 100 to each of the sub-directions. On top of that, since we can only see 2/3 of the 1,200 functions, it will come to 800 of the efficacies and 400 of the inefficacies. But of course, everyone's situation would be different. We may be sitting together, but someone of you could see behind you. And I have smaller eyes, so I probably won't be able to have a bigger peripheral vision. But there are people with large and round eyes. They would probably be able to have more of a peripheral vision. If your eyes are really small, it might be even difficult for you to see a lot of the front. Or sometimes, if it's your vision, if you have nearsight and you need to wear glasses, without glasses, everything is rather very foggy. But over here, the situation doesn't necessarily apply to this kind of nearsighted situation. The teachings given in the sutras would apply to the majority of sentient beings, not to some special cases. There are the special cases that would be able to see other things. But this teaching applies to the average sentient beings. So over here, I just simply want to correct the mistake that I had yesterday. Now let us continue to discuss more of the 6 roots. Within the sutras, though it is not very apparent, but in the commentaries, there is an emphasis of the perfect penetration root, that is the ear root. As long as you have this perfect penetration root, the root that has natural wisdom, then you can understand all the other, you can penetrate through all the other roots through this one way, through this one door. The Buddha told Ananda, if you can enter through one door into the gates of the 6 roots, then your delusions can be purified. So the objects of the 6 roots, the functions of all the roots can be purified of one moment. That's a teaching the Buddha gave to Ananda yesterday. Ananda at this point is still a bit confused. Consider Ananda at this point had already stopped the flow of afflictions. And he manifests in such a way, he appears to be quite confused in front of the Buddha. Still, look at us. We can't even say that we have completely stopped and eradicated all the coarse afflictions. For such reason, if we don't understand, it's just normal.
那下面呢，哎呦，那怎么办呢？你也不懂，我们也讲的时候都是讲不出来。然后那个。
Ananda said to the Buddha, World-honored one, how do we oppose the flow, enter deeply into one door, and cause the 6 organs to simultaneously become pure? Ananda very respectfully addressed the Buddha, saying that, World-honored one, how do we oppose the flow? Previously, the Buddha had just scolded him, saying that, wow, you're such an inferior one that you don't understand still. But Ananda didn't get upset at all. He's rather still very respectful to the Buddha, saying that, world-honored one, well, when you talk about oppose the flow, oppose is to go against, so going against the flow of samsara. If you want to oppose the samsara, going against the flow of the samsara, going the other way, then we need to enter deeply into one door and cause the 6 organs to simultaneously become pure. Ananda has this question, well, how do we supposed to do that? If I want to enter from this one door and enter deeply into one door so that I can purify all the other doors, all the other gates. To Ananda especially, those kinds of audience also share such Shravaka habitual tendencies. It is not easy for them to accept this teaching. So Ananda continued to pursue this question. This is really wonderful because of Ananda's continuous questions and curiosity and such opportunities. The Buddha continuously to reply to his questions with great patience. Of course, the Buddha's reply is not simply to address Ananda, rather to give us teachings, to give the teachings to us, the later generations of sentient beings as well, so that we can be benefited from the teachings. The Buddha over here told Ananda, you have already obtained the fruition of a Shotapana. You have already extinguished the view delusions of living beings in the three realms. But you do not yet know that your organs have accumulated habits that are without a beginning. It is through cultivation that one severs not simply these habits, but also their numerous subtleties as they pass through arisal, dwelling, change, and extinction. Now, the Shotapana fruition is the first fruition. It can be also called entering the stream. This is equivalent to say that's the path of seeing in the Shravaka yana. So for those of you who studied Abhidharma, you would know. This has also been taught in the Diamond Sutra. The entering stream doesn't mean that entering into the stream of samsara. It is entering the nature of Dhammadhatu, not getting interfered by the six objects, that's the form, sound, touch, and taste, and so on. So for those who attained Shotapana fruition, one would no longer be afraid of falling into samsara again, because one would have already extinguished the confusions that's associated to that to be eradicated by the view of all the sentient beings of form realm, desire realm, and formless realm. All of the obscurations that can be eradicated by the path of seeing, we usually would call those obscurations as the obscurations of afflictions. And on top of that, there are the kinds of obscurations that can be eradicated on the path of practice. This has been expounded quite extensively in Abhidharma and entering the gate of wisdom. So usually we would say that there are 88 kinds of afflictions associated to the path of view, and then the 81 types associated to practice. That is according to the Hinayana Abhidharma's point of view. And according to the Mahayana, there are the 4 associated to the path of seeing and 16 associated to the path of practice. So those had been expounded quite extensively in Gateway to Knowledge. At this point, Ananda had already attained the fruition of Shotapana, which means that he had already eradicated the afflictions, the obscurations of afflictions. But some would argue, especially the Madhyamika masters, would make analysis of such eradication and how much of such obscurations that he had already eradicated. Some would say that he had already eradicated all the obscurations of afflictions, both the co-emergent and imputive. However, the obscuration of knowledge has not been eradicated yet. You could still say that there are still subtle self-graspings. That's what it means over here. The Buddha over here says that though that you have attained the fruition of Shotapana, you have already eradicated the view delusion. You have extinguished the view delusion of living beings in the 3 realms. Though that's how you are right now. However, you do not yet know that your organs have accumulated habits that are without a beginning. It is through cultivation that one severs not simply these habits, but also their numerous subtleties as they are passed through arisals and dwellings and changes and extinctions. And these parts of habits as well as the numerous subtleties refers to the obscurations of knowledge, of this accumulated knowledge. And then the Buddha points out that, but you do not yet know that your organs have accumulated habits that are without a beginning. Over here, the organs is the roots, and the roots could refer to the roots of mind, which is consciousness, the roots of the mind consciousness, which is alaya. So there are the accumulated habitual tendencies on your eye organ or eye root, which is related to the eye consciousness. So there could be the accumulations of habitual tendencies accumulated on top of that alaya. And then the Buddha said that since such kinds of accumulations in your roots are accumulated from beginningless time, and it is simply that you do not know that. And these kinds of habitual tendencies can only be extinguished through practice. For such reason, since you do not even know those habits, do not even know those subtleties, and there are numerous subtleties as they pass through arisal, dwelling, change, and extinctions. The Buddha over here pointed out that since you do not know the truth of the arisal, the dwelling, change, and extinction, which is the characteristics of the phenomenal world, according to the Tibetan translation, it is also the same. It says that the characteristics of the phenomenal world, if you do not know the four characteristics of the phenomenal world, then how could you see the even more subtleties of the categories of the four characteristics, which is the arisal of the arisal, dwelling of the arisal, change of the arisal, and then extinction of the arisal, and then the arisal, dwelling, and change, and the extinction associated to dwelling, to change, and to extinction again, which would numbering 42 types. And then if you were to further divide it, that would divide again and again into infinite numbers. But of course, as someone from the Shravakayana, you would not be able to understand it. Though you have already eradicated that to be eradicated on the path of seeing, but you have not eradicated that to be eradicated on the path of practice. You have not eradicated, that is to say, you have not eradicated the obscuration of knowledge. For such reason, you would not be able to see the truth of the subtleties of all phenomena. You would not be able to see the truth of the arisal, dwelling, the changes, and the cessations. Ananda at this time had already obtained the fruition of Shodapanna, but the Buddha still would criticize him. For people with a higher level of realization, they would not get arrogant and would not react to the Buddha's scolding. But to the kind of disciples that do not have those kinds of insights, then the Buddha would scold them and then would praise them again, and then probably give the disciple a piece instruction. This is carrot after a slap or stick. Isn't that a good expression? Both funny and quite picturestic. Sometimes the Buddha would scold and sometimes give peace instructions, so it's a combination of all of that. The Buddha then told Ananda, you should now contemplate the 6 organs further. The Buddha started to expound and to make analysis of whether the 6 roots are of one entity or of other entities. He said that, look at the 6 organs. Are they 1 or 6? If you say they're 1, Ananda, why can't the ears see? Why can't the eyes hear? Why can't the head walk? Why can't the feet talk? If you were to say that the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and all of those sense organs are of 1, then there is nothing that it can be seen, or there's nothing that cannot be seen or see. But then the Buddha continued to ask him, then in such a way, if they're of 1, why can't the ears see? Why can't the eyes hear? And in terms of the root of the body, there are the different functions to it as well. Why can't your head walk? Why can't the head walk just like the feet? Because they're both body. Why can't the feet talk just like the mouth? If they cannot do that, if they cannot perform such functions, then that means the 6 roots, other than the noble ones, the mundane beings would not be able to alternate the 6 roots or to have the 6 roots mix and match in their functions. According to Master Xuanhua, he stated that the noble ones' 6 roots can be alternated and can be mixed and matched, but the functions, that is, to the 6 roots. But for the mundane beings, the beings cannot. And some disciples asked Master Xuanhua, saying that, could you give us the reference that talks about how the noble beings would be able to mix and match the functions of the 6 roots? And Master Xuanhua was a bit upset, saying that, well, why don't you engage in good practice? Rather, you would ask me such senseless questions. He appeared to be a little upset about that. Sometimes I think those questions could be meaningful. In the commentary of Mipa Rinpoche's commentary of the wisdom chapter of Bodhisattva Charvatara, he quoted that usually for the mundane beings, the 6 roots can be used exchangeably or can be fully penetrated. But for mundane beings, we can definitely use our roots, the functioning roots, but we cannot use them in such a way that it could penetrate. Our ears can only hear sounds, but cannot see things. This is very much because of the special karma associated to us. Each of the different roots, other than the functions that it can perform, there is no other functions that can be associated to it. Nowadays, there are lots of the handicapped athletes or lots of handicapped people in the world. They can do many things, and sometimes more so than the kinds of people that has all the 6 organs. That is because within each and every one of our nature, there is the Buddha nature. It is because lots of the functions can be presented in such a way as a seed. It is only that we have not attained the fruition of the noble one. So as mundane beings, though that it has been parted because of the different boundaries that it has, the Buddha over here says that if you were to say that the 6 roots are of one entity, then all of the roots should be completely penetrating in such a way the blinds would be able to see form and the deaf can hear the sounds through the other roots. Because all of the roots are of one entity, then the functions can be completely functioning through the other roots as well. So this particular root would be of no others than the others. This is an easy inference to understand. The next one, the Buddha says that if the 6 organs are definitely 6, they are of other entities, then as I now explain this subtle, wonderful Dharma door for you in this assembly, which of your 6 organs is receiving it. Now the Buddha says that I am giving you this supreme, subtle Dharma teaching in the Surangama Dharma assembly. Which one of your 6 organs is receiving the Dharma teachings? I'm giving you a class right now. Which one of your organs are receiving? Which one of your organs is receiving the Dharma teaching? At this time, Ananda said that I hear it with my ears. Ananda says that, well, my nose doesn't... Ananda pointed out that I hear it with my ears. It is not that my nose, nor my eyes, nor my body would hear the Dharma teaching. So right away, Ananda replied, it is my ear faculty. The other 5 faculties, the other 5 organs, I don't need them. And then the Buddha would refute him. The Buddha said, your ears hear by themselves. What then does it have to do with your body and mouth? Well, if you're hearing it with your ear root, then why would your body and mouth also join you in listening to the Dharma then? And then the Buddha continued to say that, and yet you ask about the principles with your mouth. The Buddha said that you're asking me the questions regarding to the principles with your mouth. If you were to say that you can receive the Dharma teaching through your ears, then why are you using your mouth to ask questions? At the time of listening to the Dharma teaching, your mind would get deeply touched. Also, your body displays veneration. You would prostrate, venerate, and then you feel this admiration. Your body doesn't necessarily need to drawing into this veneration, and you just need to listen with your ears to the Dharma teaching. But your other roots doesn't necessarily have to join it. But the truth is, at the time of listening to the Dharma teaching, the other roots are also joining in to the Dharma teaching as well. It is not completely of other entities either. Not only the other roots, the mind would join into the Dharma teaching too. Therefore, you should know that if you're not one, then they must be six. And if they're not six, they must be one. But you can't say that your organs are basically one and six. The Surangama Sutra sometimes does get quite difficult. I often think about that PhD, that professor who said that he finished reading the Surangama Sutra within one night. That must be quite good. He must be really good. I wonder how he would be able to make a summarize of this particular statement. The one must be six. If they're not six, they must be one. If they're not one, they must be six. As it is stated previously, if there were just of one entity, but it appears in such a conventional way that there are six roots, six organs, it's very apparent. Also, they're not six. How do I understand it? They're not six organs, six separate entities either. Why is that? They are of one. They must be one. We can say that as well. If the six are completely separate as separate entities, that can't be explained. If they were truly independently existent, then they can perform their own functions. According to the Madhyamika's way of making inference, we would say that if one cannot be established, then how can you establish six? I'm not so sure if we can make such observation over here. But over here, it says that because Ananda makes the observation in front of Ananda, or makes this inference in front of Ananda, saying that are the six roots of one or of the six different entities. The Buddha first refuted on being one entity, and then the Buddha said that they're neither of the six different entities either, because they're clearly connected as well. So the Buddha did not specifically refute the six organs over here being six completely different entities, but in the later part we would be able to understand that they must be one. That would directly refute that the six roots are not of the six different entities. So the Buddha said that you can't say that your organs are basically one or six. You can't say either. The Buddha then used the example of the space to further expound the connection between the six roots of being one or being six, to further demonstrate that, though that it could be one and it could be six, but indeed neither of them can be established. So the Buddha refuted on both being one entity and being of the six entities. Before we make any investigation into the different roots, we can come to the agreement that they are of one entity or of the six different entities. But if we were to truly make the observation, then we would understand that it can neither be one nor six. It is just like to say that if we were to put space into six different glasses, there are different spaces in different glasses, so six spaces, but are there of six different spaces? You could say so. But the great spaces of one entity, but there are the six spaces divided into six glasses as well. If we can recognize that one space, or there is of a one entity of the space, then the six would also be established. But the space cannot be established as one entity because space is unconditioned. It is not a solid existent thing. If it's not of a solid existent thing, there is no one or other. The Buddha says, Ananda, you should know that these organs are neither one nor six. The Buddha said that you should know there is neither of one entity nor of the six entities. It is from being upside down and sinking into involvements throughout time without a beginning that the theory of one and six has been established. There is a reason that it manifests as either one or six. The reason is that because we had been tinted with such kinds of delusion, such ignorance, because we are dwelled in this ocean of samsara for such reason, within the perfect, clear, penetrating Tathagata Garbha, there out of no reason manifests the six roots or one roots. By now, you should probably remember Yajnadatta, the Mr. Yajnadatta that we need to remember. He's a great friend of ours, and we need to remember him from the Surangama Sutra. And after knowing that, you should understand by now, because of ignorance and because of such unreasoned, unbased madness that Yajnadatta had, there is the manifestation of the six roots. It's just like that. There is the manifestation of the six roots, or the one root. And then the Buddha continued to say that, Ananda, as a Shotapanna, you have dissolved the six, but you still have not done away with the one. The Buddha said that, well, though you have already attained the fruition of Shotapanna, you have eradicated the afflictions and have already dissolved the six. You can dissolve the six roots. According to Master Changshui, whom quoted from the Diamond Sutra and the Parinirvana Sutra, where it states that after attaining this Shrodapanna fruition, all the six objects are not existent. As how the mundane beings would be, as the mundane beings would still strive after the six objects, but the ones attained the Shodapana fruition would no longer perceive them in such a way. There is no such grasping to them. However, there is still holding on to a fruition that is unconditioned. There is still a grasping to such a fruition, which is a sign that the obscuration of knowledge still has not been eradicated yet. Though the obscuration of afflictions has been eradicated, which is the ones that the obscuration that can be eradicated on the path of seeing, but the ones that's to be eradicated through practice has not been eradicated yet. That can only be eradicated at the time of attaining arhathood. Though the Buddha said that you do not have grasping towards the 6 roots, but you still have not let go of the grasping to the mind. And then the Buddha gives an example saying that Ananda, it is like the emptiness fitting into different shaped vessels. The emptiness is said to be whatever shapes the vessel is. But if you get rid of the vessels and look at the space, the emptiness, you will say it is one and the same. This is such an important example given over here. Now, if we were to have many different shaped glass vessels, for example, 6. Each of them would hold different shapes. Maybe one is of a rectangular, the other one of a sphere, and the other one of a triangular. So each of those glass vessels would be very different. Any kinds of vessels, really. Or even our house and the shrine hall as a vessel. Our classroom as a rectangular shaped vessel. And sometimes we would have those meeting halls that has a more of a cylindrical shape. There are different shapes to the different containers. Within those different shapes of the rooms or vessels, the space would be of the different shapes as well. But if the glasses, the vessels were all broken, then the space would become a large emptiness. Since you would say the emptiness is one and the same, but how can that emptiness become alike and different at your convenience? Well, how could you differentiate this as one or other, this is the same or not? What is your basic logic to differentiate it or not? The space within the 6 vessels versus this large space, are they of one entity or of other entities? Are they the same or are they different? Since the space is not existent, is not something that is existent, it is simply has a name called space or called emptiness, then how could you differentiate it? Even less, can it be one or not one? You can't even say it is of one entity or of other entities, not of one entity. Therefore, you should understand that the 6 receptive functioning organs should be the same way. Just like the space, the 6 roots are like that. The great space is equivalent to the Buddha nature, that is of the luminous wisdom. At the time of manifesting in front of the different sentient beings, it could manifest differently according to the different vessels. And then, since each of the person would have the different vessels, that is the eye consciousness, ear consciousness, and so on and so forth, for that reason, there would be more of the divisions. And this particular example would discuss such profundity in this way. I think you can contemplate upon it as well. Now let's look at the 6 roots. Their is the ultimate pure root and the conventional roots. The teachings over here are a bit different than the Abhidharma and the Buddhist logic, but I think it's quite interesting. At the time of studying Abhidharma, we've learned how different roots, in fact, has different shapes. There are different shapes described in the Abhidharma. Of course, that is from the realist schools. When it comes to the schools such as Mind-only school and Madhyamika school, there is no longer the description of the actually existent form associated to each root. So there is no such descriptions anymore. Now let's look at how the Buddha talks about the root of the different roots. Let's look at the first one, which is seeing. Seeing occurs because of the two appearances of darkness and light, and their like firmly adhere to quietude in what originally was wonderfully perfect. The essence of seeing reflects form and combines with form to become an organ. In its pure state, the organ of the eye is the four elements, and yet it takes the name eye organ and is shaped like a grape. Of the superficial sense organs and the four defiling objects, this one rays out after form. The description of the proceedings of how subject and object and consciousness occurs is different than how we usually would state. Over here it says that in the external object there is the bright form, the light, as well as the darkness of the form. Since there are the brightness and darkness within the wondrous power of the Buddha nature, there would be there is a sense of adherence, so things would stick together. According to some commentaries, the particular word that's used is sticking or adhere, which refers to tinting or covering. The covering up of the Buddha nature, of the bright Buddha nature, and then would lead to a view, it would lead to seeing. So it says that in the Tibetan translation, the adhere, instead of translated into adhere or sticking, it is a pure connection. So within the Buddha nature, there is a pure aspect of seeing, a pure condition, and then there is the object to be seen. Because of the object to be seen correlates to the form, which then forms the root, that is our eyes. Usually, according to Buddhist logic and Abhidharma, we need to rely on our organs to then produce the eye consciousness, which is seeing. In its pure state, the organ of the eye is the fourth element. The nature of the root, the nature of the organ is the pure four elements. That refers to the ultimate root, the ultimate organ. And yet it takes the name eye organ. According to the commentary, the pure organ can only be owned by the noble ones. The mundane ones do not have the pure organs. Also, the eyes, that the eye's organ is shaped like a grape. The Chinese translation has a unit name after the grape, but in the Tibetan translation, it is just one grape. There is no other units associated to the grapes anymore. And such kind of eye organ that is shaped as a group is of the superficial sense organ. it has the four defiling objects. This one races out after form. This is one particular way of explanation within which it talks about after there is a formation of the root, there is the pure four elements that forms the root that is called the ultimate root, and then such ultimate root can only be associated with, or only the noble ones can have those ultimate roots. And then the conventional superficial roots are the ones that the mundane beings have, and the shape of them are of the shape of grapes. By relying on these eye organs, since it is formed by the four objects, four defiling objects, that is, there is really no limitation to it, and then they would start racing out to the outer forms. This is just one of the explanations. Master Jiaguang also has another way of explanation. He said that there is no supreme roots, no ultimate roots. Rather, he said that the nature of the organs are the four great elements, which is already pure. On top of that, such kinds of pure eye organs, there are all kinds of phenomena that would manifest. There are the forms that is as subtle as the shape of grapes. So according to some commentaries, it considers that the pure part that is formed by the four great elements are the ones that is owned by the noble ones, but the ones that is the superficial organs are the ones the mundane beings would share. So let's look at another one. The teachings given in the Abhidharma are different than that of the Surangama Sutra. The Surangama Sutra describes the shape of the eye organ as a grape, but in Abhidharma it says that the eyes are not the eyeball, rather it has this pure form that is all pervasive, all inside the eyes. Those are the ones that would be able to grasp onto the external objects. Not sure why over here it says the grapes. Do the eyes look like grapes? The crystalline lens. Can you speak up? The crystalline lens looks like a crystal-shaped grape. What's the shape of this crystalline lens? Is it the shape of a grape? It is the shape of a grape? Is it spherical? Such professional jargons. Crystalline lens. All right, let's see if we have someone who studied the nose professionally. The department for nose, for eyes, for mouth. The Buddha continued to say that hearing occurs because of the two reverberations of movement and stillness. And they're like firmly adhere to quietude in what originally was wonderful perfection. The essence of hearing reflects sound and resound, with sound to become the organ of the ear. So same as the previous one.
刚才是眼根，对，我现在是二课，就是弄耳朵的人，就是让看有没有。
We are looking at the ears. There are two types of reverberations, which then would become sound, the movement and the stillness.
就污染了，就念染啊，就是念染，就是念染什么呢？
And they're like firmly adhere to quietude in what originally was wonderful perfection. Over here, adhere is to tint or to cover up onto the Buddha nature. The Tibetan translation states that it is a luminosity, a pure condition. And then the essence of hearing reflects sound and resounds with the sound to become the organ of the ear. It seems that there is the coming back and forth between the essence of hearing, then reflects sound, and then resound with the sound to become the organ of the ear. At first, there is the adhering to Buddha nature, and then appears to be hearing, and that hearing is the essence of hearing. The essence of hearing would reflect upon the hearing that is the object, and then it would become the root of the hearing, which is the ear. In its pure state, the organ of the ear is the four elements. It takes the name ear organ and is shaped like a fresh curled leaf. Only the noble ones would be able to hear through their pure organs that far surpass that of the mundane beings. But for mundane beings, of the superficial sense organs and for defiling objects, this one is loosed up on sound. In the description of Abhidharma, the ear organ actually looks like a burl of a particular type of tree. I'm not so sure how the tree is. How would the fresh leaf curl up? I'm not quite sure why it is described in that shape. Maybe it looks like a cochlea. It looks like the shell of a snail. Maybe after the leaf, the new leaf curled up, it looks similar. At least it looks similar. Look at how wonderful the Buddha is, that he would be able to expound even the Western doctors would know today. Maybe we should stop here today.
可以，下面的你们再，现在我们看一下那个，蜗牛，像猪跟0七，这些都还是要记住啊，以后还是这个很重要的。
These are quite important
我们现在的这个
to
应该是
remember.
这种医学就结合起来，就是这样的话，那个。
We can affiliate the knowledge of the Now medicine to the teachings of the Buddha, especially when it relates to how the organs can perceive the information of the object.